Margaret Wilson had been employed at Riverside Diner for nearly 15 years, at 43, with gray streaks starting to thread through her once dark hair. She had come to cherish the faded vinyl booths and the comforting jingle off the bell above the entrance. The small-town Illinois diner had been her haven through life's tempests, her divorce 8 years prior, raising daughter Sarah single-handedly, and the constant battle to make ends meet. The diner stood along the town's central street, its wide windows gazing out at the tranquil current of the river that lent place its name. Time moved at its own pace here, shaped by the shifting seasons mirrored in the water, far from the hectic rhythm of urban existence. It was an early autumn Tuesday when Thomas Bennett first stepped into the diner. Margaret spotted him instantly tall, with striking silver at his temples set against dark hair, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit that seemed alien in thermidist setting. He moved with quiet assurance, but it was the warmth in his gaze that held Margaret's satin tone. "Good morning," she said warmly, plotching a menu down and pouring coffee with the effortless grace of someone who'd done this ritual countless times. First time at Riverside. Thomas glanced up with a kind smile. "Is it that noticeable?" "Wouldn't see many suits around here," Margaret answered with a soft chuckle. "Just passing through?" "Actually, I'll be here for a few weeks," he said, exploring some property ventures by River. Over the next few days, Thomas became irregular, always choosing Margaret's section. Ordered the same meal, 2 eggs over medium, wheat toast, black coffee, and always tipped generously. Their morning chats became a highlight for Margaret. Brief talks about the weather, the turning leaves by the river, or Sarah's college applications. "Your daughter sounds extraordinary," Thomas remarked one morning after Margaret shared Sarah's acceptance to 3 colleges. "You must be so proud." "I am," Margaret replied, her eyes sparkling with joy but clouded with worry about funding it. "She deserves the opportunity I never had." A warm ease blossomed between them, the kind that grows naturally when 2 souls find an unexpected bond. Margaret began to notice how Thomas's gaze lingered when she looked away, how he timed his visits for quieter moments so they could talk longer. She found herself paying extra attention to her appearance on mornings she expected him. What Margaret didn't know was that Thomas Bennett wasn't just any investor. He was the CEO of Horizon Developments, a multi-million-dollar firm focused on reviving small-town main streets while keeping their unique charm intact. The property venture he mentioned was a major project set to reshape their struggling town. After nearly a month of this morning exchanges, Margaret made a bold choice that felt both daunting and essential on the back office receipt. With hands that shook slightly, she wrote, "This might be improper, but so many opportunities come only once. Would you like to have dinner sometime? Not as your server, Margaret." She slid the receipt face down with his change, then busied herself with other tables, her heart pounding fiercely. Thomas read the note, looked up with an expression Margaret couldn't quite read, left a $20 tip under his coffee mug, and departed with a smile but no reply. Margaret spent the rest of her shift convinced she'd made a dreadful error. At her age, with her duties, what had she been thinking? The embarrassment trailed her home to the modest 2-bedroom apartment shepherded with Sarah. "Mom, someone left this for you," Sarah said when Margaret got home, gesturing to a vibrant bouquet of autumn-hued flowers on their kitchen table. The card read simply, "Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. I'll pick you up." Thomas double quotes the next evening. As Thomas drove them to dinner in his unassuming sedan, Margaret finally voiced the question weighing on her heart. "Why would someone like you be drawn to someone like him?" Her voice was softer than she meant, heavy with the doubts of a woman who'd long believed her best years were gone. Thomas pulled into a scenic overlook by the river and turned to her. "Margaret, I've spent decades building a thriving company, attending board meetings, and making choices that impact many lives. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to simply connect with another person." He reached for her hand. "When I step into that dinner, you don't see the CEO or the big deals, you see me. Do you know how rare that is?" Their dinner wasn't at a fancy restaurant, as Margaret had worried. Instead, Thomas took her to a cozy farmhouse on the town's edge's grandmothersham. Now is when he visited. "I wanted you to see how I truly am," he said as he cooked a simple meal of roasted chicken and vegetables in a kitchen adorned with hand-stitched towels and well-worn castron pans. Over dinner, Thomas shared the real reason for his stay in town. Horizon doesn't just buy properties, Margaret. We collaborate with communities to breathe new life into overlooked places. The Riverside district has such promise. So you're going to change everything? Margaret asked, concerned about what this meant for Thiedner, her livelihood. Not change, renew, improve, Thomas clarified. The diner will stay just as it is, the heart of Main Street, but the empty buildings around it could become shops, apartments, a community hub. As autumn turned to winter, Margaret and Thomas's bond deepened. Sarah earned a partial scholarship to her top-choice university, but the remaining costs still loomed large. One evening, Thomas arrived at Margaret's apartment with a folder. "This isn't charity," he said firmly, sensing her hesitation. "It's an investment in Sarah's future, a loan she can repay when she's settled in her career. If that feels better to you." Margaret began to object, but Holmes continued. "Margaret, having wealth doesn't make me better than anyone else. It just means I've had different chances. Let me share those chances with someone who deserves them." After much discussion, Margaret agreed. Not just for Sarah's sake, but because she saw this was Thomas's way of showing care, of leveling the playing field in a world that wasn't always just. The following spring, construction started on the Riverside district. The diner stayed open, serving as the unofficial hub for the project. Margaret continued working there, prouder than ever of Harold in the community's heart. On the one-year anniversary of their first meeting, Thomas took Margaret back to the scenic overlook where they'd had their first honest talk. "I've been thinking about second chances," he said, watching the sunset gild the river. "How life sometimes hands us exactly what we need when we've stopped hoping for anything at all." Margaret smiled, reflecting on how much had changed. In a year, like a waitress who took a risk on a receipt, and a man who entered a diner seeking property, but found a home instead. Thomas squeezed her hand as they watched the river glide below. Margaret thought about the path that had led them here, to people in the autumn of their lives, discovering that new beginnings were still possible, that fresh chapters were waiting to be written. The town was transforming. Sarah was flourishing at university, and Margaret had found an expected love. But more than that, she had discovered a truth she'd nearly forgotten. It's never too late for a second chance, never too late for a new story to begin. And sometimes, the most remarkable tales start with the simplest acts, like a heartfelt note scribbled on the back of a diner receipt.